Glider 7-3 Launch and Recovery Procedures, Maneuvers and Flight. Let's dive into the takeoff procedures for self-launching gliders. Now, these gliders are a bit more complex, with additional systems compared to your regular gliders. First things first, we need to thoroughly inspect our aircraft. Check everything from ailerons to flaps, fuel systems, engines, and more. It's like a detailed health check for the glider. Once we're clear and good to go, we start up the engine following a checklist. And remember, it can get pretty loud, so make sure you've got your hearing protection on. After a successful start, we move on to taxiing. Now, these gliders come in different shapes, with tricycle or tailwheel landing gear. Pay attention to the airport layout, especially if you're dealing with a long wingspan. Be mindful of crosswinds and take it slow, especially on soft ground. Next up, the pre-takeoff check. It's like our final check before hitting the skies. We've got a checklist for this too, covering fuel, oil, engine run-up, and a bunch of other important things. We're also making sure our seatbelts are snug, doors and windows are closed and locked, and all the instruments are set for takeoff. We can't afford to miss anything here. Now, mistakes happen, but we need to avoid them as much as possible. Watch out for common errors like improper brake use, taxiing too fast, or neglecting the checklist. When it comes to the pre-takeoff check, don't rush through it. Improper positioning for run-up, missed emergency procedures, or radio slip-ups. These are the things we want to avoid. Let's wrap up our discussion with the normal takeoff procedures and climb out for self-launching gliders. Now, after completing our pre-takeoff checklist and checking for traffic, we're all set for takeoff. If we're at an airport with a control tower, don't forget to get that air traffic control clearance before taxiing onto the active runway. Now, during takeoff, we smoothly apply full throttle, tracking the centerline of the runway. Once we hit the recommended lift-off airspeed, we lift off and accelerate in ground effect until reaching the appropriate climb airspeed. If there's one ahead, stick to the best angle of climb airspeed until you're in the clear. If not, go for the best rate of climb airspeed or the one for optimal engine cooling during climb. Now, folks, crosswind takeoffs can be a bit tricky with these gliders. The long wingspan makes them vulnerable to wingtip strikes, so start your takeoff roll with the upwind wing on the ground. Coordinate those ailerons and rudders to prevent any unwanted surprises. As you gain airspeed, gradually decrease those control inputs for smooth flight. And remember, establish a wind correction angle during climbs so you stay on the extended centerline of the runway. Now, climb out and shutdown procedures are crucial. Keep an eye on those power plant limitations, and follow the recommendations in the GFM PO for power settings and target airspeeds. Cooling is key here, folks. The engine heats up during takeoff and climb, so monitor those temperatures closely. If you've got cowl flaps for cooling, make sure they're set right. And let's talk about shutdown. We don't want to shock cool the engine, so reduce power slowly to let it cool down gradually. Check your GFM PO for recommended shutdown procedures. Now, retractable engine gliders are more efficient with the engine stowed, but be mindful of that drag when it's extended. Ensure proper propeller alignment before stowing. Let's discuss the common errors here include not following the manufacturer's recommended procedures, losing control during engine shutdown, or neglecting proper engine extension and restart procedures. So, let's make sure we're thorough and precise in these critical phases of flight. Let's dive into the critical phase of flight, landing procedures for self-launching gliders. If you find yourself needing to land under power, you must perform engine restart procedures at an altitude that allows sufficient time for reconfiguration. Follow the manufacturer's recommended engine start checklist, ensuring the engine warms up after restart. Check that all essential systems for landing, like the electrical system and landing gear, are operational. Here's a crucial caution. Adhere to the recommended engine extension and restart procedures. If not, you might unintentionally attempt a landing with high drag, significantly affecting performance. Be prepared for the possibility of the engine failing to start, and plan accordingly for a landing with increased drag. Now, when planning your landing, always aim to land into the wind. Plan your approach to avoid obstacles, and choose a landing area that accommodates your glider's performance limitations. Take crosswind conditions in the landing surface into account. After touchdown, maintain directional control, slow down, and complete the after-landing checklist when appropriate. Common errors during landing include poor judgment of the approach path, improper use of flaps, spoilers, and dive brakes, incorrect approach and landing speed, improper crosswind correction, flawed technique during flare and touchdown, insufficient directional control after landing, improper use of brakes, failure to use the appropriate checklist, and neglecting proper radio communication procedures. Next, let's talk about glider port and airport traffic patterns. Familiarize yourself with the approach and landing traffic pattern, starting from an initial point, IP, leading to the downwind leg, base leg, final approach, flare, touchdown, rollout, and stop. Remember to adhere to FAA regulations and recommended procedures. Determine a proper visual reference point for your IP and establish a well-thought-out pattern entry. As you approach the IP, enter the downwind leg, keeping an eye out for other aircraft and making any necessary radio calls. Prioritize safety by completing the landing checklist before entering the downwind leg. Use the FUSTALL checklist. Check flaps, if applicable. Ensure undercarriage is down and locked, if applicable. Maintain a normal speed. Set trim. Check air brakes. Scan the landing area, and execute a smooth landing. During the downwind leg, plan to be at an altitude of 800 to 1000 feet AGL. Adjust your altitude and use spoilers, dive brakes as necessary. When turning onto the base leg, ensure you're at least 500 feet AGL. Maintain awareness of other aircraft and adjust your turn to correct for wind drift. On the final approach, keep the bank angle below 45 degrees, ensure the yaw string is straight, and use spoilers, dive brakes as needed to maintain the desired glide angle. Establish a stabilized approach no lower than 100 feet AGL, using half-open spoilers, dive brakes to avoid excessive descent rates. Adjust spoilers, dive brakes as necessary for proper glide path control. Begin the flare when within 3 to 5 feet of the landing surface, holding the glider in a level or slightly tail-low attitude. Touch down on the main wheel, ensuring a nose-high attitude without landing tail first. After touchdown, maintain directional control, roll out straight along the centerline, and be cautious of obstacles. Consider the long wingtips, susceptible to damage from runway signage and lighting. Turning off the runway should only be done when the glider is under control. Remember, landing in high winds may require a higher approach airspeed, and pilots should add half the reported gust factor to the normal recommended approach speed. Alright, that concludes our lesson on landing procedures for self-launching gliders. If you click like and subscribe and leave a comment, we will provide a coupon for a free PDF download, one of 9 ebooks. However, each individual can only download up to 1 out of 9 ebooks for free.